Hello, welcome everyone. We are excited to spend the next hour or so together for our session. We get through this together, powerful collaborations amid COVID-19. My name is Megan Coolidge. I'll be the host for today's conversation. I am a part of the team at Community Wealth Partners. We're a social sector consulting firm. But today I'm really honored to be wearing my hat as one of the facilitators of the Healthy Food Community of Practice. This is a community of nearly 40 organizations across the country, all working to help people experiencing food insecurity and specifically those that have faced systemic barriers to access and consume healthier food. So all of our panelists who are joining us today, Davida, Randy, Lyle, are a part of that community. And I will let them introduce themselves in more detail in just a minute. Before we dive in, I just want to ground us first with a poem that really speaks to the power of food as a connector. So if we could just show the image real quick. This poem is titled, "Perhaps the World Ends Here," by Joy Harjo. The world begins at a kitchen table. No matter what, we must eat to live. The gifts of earth are brought and prepared, set on the table. So it has been since creation, and it will go on. We chase chickens or dogs away from it, babies teethe at the corners, they scrape their knees under it. It is here that children are given instructions on what it means to be human. We make men at it, we make women. At this table, we gossip, recall enemies and the ghosts of lovers. Our dreams drink coffee with us as they put their arms around our children. They laugh with us at our poor falling down selves, and as we put ourselves back together once again, at the table. The table has been a house in the rain, an umbrella in the sun. We have begun and ended at this table. It is a place to hide in the shadow of terror, a place to celebrate the terrible victory. We have given birth on this table and have prepared our parents for burial here. At this table, we sing with joy, with sorrow. We pray of suffering and remorse. We give thanks. Perhaps the world will end at the kitchen table while we are laughing and crying, eating of the last sweet bite. So we wanted to start with that poem today because we, all of us that are part of this healthy food community of practice, and I'm sure you as well, we know that food tends to our immediate physical needs, but it's also deeply connected to our mental and our spiritual and social emotional well-being. And so today we're going to integrate, you'll notice, art throughout this session to recognize how food is integral to those other elements of health in all of our communities. So as we jump into the conversation, we'd love to know who's in the room with us today. So please introduce yourself in the chat, and you'll see the connection in just a minute, but we'd love, as you introduce yourself, to share with us, how have your elders or ancestors influenced how you think about food? So let us know your name, where you're coming from, and share a response to that question. And as we have introductions start to come in, I'm going to briefly introduce our panelists. So as I mentioned, I have the privilege of being in conversation today with our three panelists. Davida Davison is the Executive Director of Food Lab Detroit, which is an organization established to support independent food businesses. And she has long advocated for an equitable and sustainable restaurant industry. So Davida, you want to just give a wave to folks?
Hey, everybody.
Welcome. We also have Lyle Loma Waima, who is the Benefits Enrollment Coordinator for Rio Arriba County and is the Northern New Mexico Rural Health Network Tribal Liaison. He's a passionate advocate for tribal elders in his community. So welcome, Lyle.
Thank you for having me.
We're excited to have you. And last but not least, we have Randy Feliciano, who is a Senior Program Manager with the National Council on Aging Center for Benefits Access and provides training and support to benefit enrollment centers across the US. Welcome, Randy. And I see some introductions starting to come in here. We have LaToya from Des Moines, who says growing up, she was taught not to waste food. I think that's a very, very common sentiment. Thanks, LaToya. Great. So as others come in, I want to also just further introduce the Healthy Food Community of Practice. So as I mentioned, all of our panelists are a part of this community. And rather than me sit here and explain it to you, I think it'll be much more interesting if we just show our quick video on what the Community of Practice is all about. So if we could show that real quick, that would be great.
We've just seen so much in the pandemic, and these relationships have been so essential.
I haven't made one connection or collaboration, I've made all of them. The breaking down of silos and working together is the only way we're going to do this.
This is our time. This is the moment. For us to imagine, for us to envision, for us to build, for us to question, and for us to come together and really think about what a new food system looks like that is equitable, that is just, and more delicious for all.
Thanks so much. As you can see, Davida was featured in our video as well, but this community came together in March 2020. We all know what happened then, and it has been a powerful kind of connector and collaborator for folks all around the country working on this tough and critical issue of food insecurity. If you have any questions or want to learn more about the community, feel free to check out our website at healthyfoodcommunity.org, or you can reach out to any of us. I just want to acknowledge a few more folks who are in the room with us. So we have Brandon from DC. He said, my elders showed me that herbs can be grown even in a rough neighborhood. Food is preventative, medicine, art, connection to cultures. It's science and piques all the senses. I love that, Brandon. Thank you for sharing. Christina from Alexandria said, food is the pinnacle of family life and gatherings. Love that. And Lori says, I learned from my elders that food brings us together and the joy of hospitality. Some incredible lessons there. Thanks for sharing, everyone. So before we jump into our panel conversation, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Lyle to do a land acknowledgement before we get started. So Lyle, over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Lyle Moima. I am from the village of Santa Clara Pueblo and also from Northern Arizona, the village of Upper Muncapi. And my land acknowledgement is that we are stewards of this earth. We are here to take care of Mother Earth and we do not own it. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Lyle. I'd like to start with that gratitude for the earth that we all inherit. So thank you. So we're going to jump into a conversation with our panelists. And I just want to say before we get going to please go ahead and chat questions in as they come to you throughout our conversation. We're going to have some time at the end for a little bit of Q&A with our panelists. So would love for you to go ahead and start asking your questions as we're talking. So to get started, I want to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves. And if you don't mind, would love to hear a little bit about how your ancestors have influenced the way that you think about food today. And what does food mean to you? So Davida, I'm actually going to start with you, if you don't mind.
Yeah, thanks, Megan, so much for bringing us all together. Thank you to the organizers of the Upswell Conference. I have been attending for the last couple of days, and it's been wonderful. And what a privilege and honor it is for me to be on this panel with my brothers and colleagues and friends, Randy and Lyle. So it's really is a privilege. So thanks, guys. Yeah, I'll be real quick because I could be expansive about how my ancestors have influenced the way that I think about food. And I say that as an African American who knows that the influence that my ancestors has on food is a 400-year history, right? Black folks have toiled in every aspect of this country's food system, growing it, selling it, serving it, creating it, offering it up, and also making the beverages to go along with it, right? And so for 400 years, my ancestors have contributed and, dare I say, built this food system with, of course, I cannot take away from the fact that we were enslaved and we were growing food on the land that was stolen from our First Nations people. So it's really important that I connect the dots between Lyle and myself and pay homage to his people who have suffered great genocide on stolen land that then my people, enslaved Black people, then had to cultivate and harvest. So I just wanted to make sure that I honored that. But just really quick, specifically, the influence that it has had on my life personally, I would say that from 1915 to 1970, there was an exodus of almost 6 million people who changed the face of America. Isabel Wilkerson talks about what has been coined the Great Migration in her book that's called The Warmth of Other Suns. And my mother and father were a part of that Great Migration. My mother and father left the rural South to go to Detroit in 1964. And so I say, what kind of influence that have on me? I was the first person in my family born outside of the South. But even though my parents left Alabama, the place, they never left Alabama, the idea. And what that means is that for me, my parents growing up in rural Alabama had a definite effect on how I think about food today. The first way is because my mother and father would always go back South every year. We would call it going home. And so what I can remember specifically is my mother and father, my mother specifically packing what was called shoebox lunches. See, I was born in 1969, and even in 1969, during my lifetime, it was not safe for Black folks to just pull over on the side of the road and eat at any restaurant where we felt that our money could afford. No, mommy packed shoebox lunches, and that shoebox lunch was usually packed with fried chicken or potato salad and some drinks. And we ate that shoebox lunch under usually a tin roof. And so I remember that vividly. And then, of course, my mother had a garden. And in Detroit, we have over 1,900 farms and community gardens. And my mother grew everything that we ate. And so it meant suppers of fresh greens and black-eyed peas and homemade cornbread and homemade ice cream. And so that still carries with me today. And I'll just stop right there. And I can't wait to hear from my brothers, Randy and Lyle, in terms of how their ancestors have influenced the way they think about food.
Thanks so much, Davida. Always love hearing your story. And with that, I want to pass it to Randy. Same question for you, Randy.
Davida's energy wakes me up and gets me going. I love this. I am a New Yorican, proud, born and raised in the city of New York with indigenous Taino roots, which the food from Puerto Rico is heavily influenced by Central and North Africa and is indigenous in nature to what's grown there. And so I was very, very, very fortunate to have had such a fantastic relationship with my late grandmother, who started my career consequently in this field of aging. And she taught me the value of food that's grown in your backyard, right? And so when she came to the States from Puerto Rico, she made sure that on her windowsill in public housing, that she had oregano growing and that she had a tomato plant growing. Like, she wanted to remember what it was like to be back home. That she had, I remember stepping on something that rolled under the bed and it was coconuts. And I'm like, why are there coconuts under the bed? And she said, that's how we get them to like fully get ready for preparation. You got to keep them in a dark place. I'm like, really, Grandma? And it's just such fond memories. And yeah, actually, it's funny, these images, I'm glad you guys are showing them. Everything in this beautiful picture, which I did not procure, I just found this on the web, my grandmother had in her possession. That, with the coconut, that's funny. That thing in the front, that brown round like bowl, that's called a pilon. And that is indigenous, but also African influence cutlery that's used to crush bananas and garlic and things to make amazing meals that I love, that we'll see in the next image. But real quick, the picture in the middle, that image in the middle, that's a grinder. I remember my grandmother used that to grind coffee beans and to also grind pretty much any sort of like peppers she needed to use for preparing food. And then obviously the grater in the back was used for bananas and also different cheeses. So that was pretty cool. And then the other image that I provided is of a pilon that has plátanos in it, which is, again, an African influenced dish, which is to this day my favorite meal in the world, called mofongo. And my grandmother used to have me make that in the kitchen with her. And you take it, you add garlic, you add meat, you add all types of stuff, you roll it into a ball, it's fried, and you eat it, and it is delicious. And so food is a process. Food to me is a part of your story. Food to me is a part of communing and fellowship. Every time I went to shop with my grandmother, which was an exhausting experience, we never went to one place. It was La Marqueta, and in La Marqueta is where you got your fresh fish and you got your beans in a bag and rice in a bag. You went to the supermarket only to shop in the perimeter if the Marqueta was closed. Anything down the aisles, my grandmother said, is not food. If it's in a box or if it's in a can, it's for emergencies only, is what she taught me. Her freezer was always empty because she believed that nothing was really meant to be frozen. Only, again, in an emergency, you should eat fresh. And so I remember the value of that. I remember the value of going to the local butcher to get eggs and chicken, and the meat market, like where you literally told the guy behind the counter, I want the meat cut this way. I need this much in weight, which now is considered, bourgeois and very retail today. But back then they were everywhere and it was really familiar. And so, that's a part of my storyline when it comes when it comes to this topic as a New Yorican, is that African indigenous influence. And so that's a part of my story.
I love it. Thanks so much, Randy. And we're getting love for both of your stories in the chat. Latoya says, we go back home to Mississippi every year, and my mother still packs fried chicken to take on the road. And Elaine said she loves mofongo. She tried it for the first time last week at a Puerto Rican restaurant in DC. So already resonating with folks. Lyle, how about you?
I want to know which one. I can't find a place that sells it.
That's great. Lyle, how about you?
All right, so Sengiti, Kundawaha, Navi Kema, thank you guys. Good afternoon. Thank you, my friends, for having me here today. But food to me is a lot of different things. We are taught that our plants, our food, are our children. So without water, we have nothing. We have no Cokes, we have no beer, we have no wine, we have nothing. We have nothing without water. So that is one of the things that is really prevalent to me, that without water, we don't have life. But to me, also, food is everything, food brings family together, food brings community together, food brings religion together. I had an uncle that was from the Philippines, so I learned how to make adobo and jungle soup and rice and different things like that, and just the whole ethnic background of food is awesome, like our sister Davida was saying, we tampered with so many different types of pollens and foods to be able to make different kinds of varieties of vegetables and whatnot, so for me, food is a living, it has a life, it drinks, it eats, it grows, it dies. So it is much like us as human beings, it has a soul, it has everything. So for me, we have to take care of our plants just like we do our children, because in return, it brings us good health, it brings us nourishment, it makes everybody happy. And, so that's just a quick, brief take for me. And, so thank you guys.
Thanks, Lyle. And I love how you said that food brings family and community together. And so on that note, I want to transition us to talk about how when, your communities were facing lack of access to food during the pandemic, how did you care for one another? And Randy, maybe I'll toss it to you to start on this question.
Yes, and this will blend into this wonderful project we did. But I also want to make sure, Lyle, that you and I are cognizant that I want to give stage to Davida, because I know she's got some amazing stuff to share. So I'm going to try to synthesize this. So we both have to make this effort, okay? So I work with the National Council on Aging, really quick. And we're a national organization that is very passionate about the needs of older adults and adults with disabilities. And we somewhat dabble, but in a much deeper way now, in the food space. And so we're very, very happy to participate in this community. And as such, given my relationship with Lyle, I had an idea that popped in my head a few years ago when I met him. And that idea was around establishing locally sourced foods in his pueblo to the elders through their senior centers. And so without further ado, there's a short 2-minute video I would like to showcase that gives you a background on this fantastic, very, very short, but highly impactful pilot that Lyle and I had the opportunity to work on together.
In the spring and summer of 2021, the National Council on Aging, in partnership with the Santa Clara Pueblo, launched an innovative community-based program to reclaim the tribe's food sovereignty. The goal, break down the barriers to healthy and culturally relevant foods for more than 500 tribal elders dependent on sugary processed foods. A modest $100,000 investment was used literally as the seed money to purchase not just seeds, but a tractor, harvesting and irrigation equipment, and pay for staff time of the partner organizations providing culturally relevant technical assistance and helping tribal elders access benefits. This grassroots endeavor leveraged the individual land plots owned by the elders, and the Santa Clara Department of Agriculture was able to hire seasonal workers and garner support from Pueblo volunteers. Local farmers will continue providing their produce for elder meal programs moving forward. Nutritious meals incorporating the locally grown vegetables and fruit were prepared in a culturally relevant manner and served in congregate settings at 15 different senior center sites.
And it's good, real good, fresh.
Meals were also delivered to more than 400 homebound tribal elders across the reservation in a remote corner of northwest New Mexico.
Because there's sometimes that we can't go to town, and sometimes you guys bring those things for us, and it's a really good help. At least we can get, fresh stuff that we could eat.
The National Council on Aging's pilot food sovereignty program demonstrates how a small seed nurtured with care can grow into a harvest of nutrition, health, and economic opportunity.
the elders get to see their lands planted, and that was their livelihood, and they all get to see that again.
And that is my brother Lyle's beautiful voice you hear in the background. And, you know, you can't say enough about how this project wasn't just something that had an impact, like physically, right? Like we provided through Lyle and his contacts, and I'll tell you more about it in a second, to the elders of the reservation. But it really was something very spiritual in that experience. I know that's not a word we use very often, but food connects to our inner being. It really does. It connects to us in so many ways. And I'm going to allow Lyle to shine a light on that later on. But I just want to give you kind of the details of the operational side of this, because I think the story part should come from Lyle, because Lyle not only lives there, but he's in some of those photos. I don't know if you spotted him a few times. So basically the idea was for me to grab pen and paper, or in this day and age, my laptop, and write a proposal, given Megan and her fantastic team's offer to all of us that they had funding available for some pilot innovations. And I remembered, oh, I have this one in the back of my head. And working with a grant writer, we put together this wonderful piece to highlight this holistic approach. So when you heard my background shared earlier, I provide technical support to a network of grantees across the country. Lyle is one of my grantees. He works for Arriba, Department of Health and Human Services, and they provide connections for older adults to 5 federal benefits, which we provide them funding through the federal government to screen and enroll these individuals in these programs. Things like SNAP and Medicaid, and specific programs under Medicare, and the LIHEAP, which is a federal benefit for heating and cooling assistance. And so Lyle has that background. He works with case managers and therapists. And so this is part of his day-to-day. And I knew for a fact that if we were able to, as an organization, NCOA, marry that to some of this food work, we may be onto something. And we sure were. In, I want to say, more like 2.5 months of this 3-month pilot, right? Because you know how it is when you're starting a grant, it takes a few weeks, sometimes even months, to get it kicked off the ground. Lyle and the Department of Agriculture rocked it. That's the only way that I can describe it. They really, really took this serious. You can see from some of the images, immediately they purchased a tractor. And I don't want to speak too much on the tractor because there's a really beautiful story behind it. But basically, that tractor was used to pull fresh produce from the individual plots owned by each of the elders on the reservation. And we're speaking about more than 500 people. They had a tractor that was, 30, 40 years old, that was falling apart. And so that one purchase from this small grant, as you heard Armando say in the video, went a very long way. And it is, by the way, a very sustainable purchase. We speak sustainability as in this, right? Money, but sustainability is also in equipment and things that actually do the work, right? And so through a very community-focused effort, the enrolled members, the tribal community that resides in the Santa Clara, the Tiwa people, were able to pull this food. And as you saw, there was a bowl in one of the images. Man, that was some amazing salsa they made. And they had a celebration around that salsa to kick off this pilot. And, you know, it was incredible that they were able to eat their own fresh fruits and vegetables. And the idea was to introduce that into their diets through congregate meals at the senior centers and home delivered meals. They also utilized, was it 1 or 2 greenhouses and a local farm? So they were able to pull a lot of food and start packaging it quickly through the Department of Agriculture and the community members themselves. So it was a real labor of love. Lyle and his team came in, they rolled their sleeves up. They not only screened and enrolled people in benefits so that they can provide that additional support, but they reintroduced culturally relevant and healthy food back into the diets of over 500 people. And in that time, screened and enrolled close to 500 people in federal and local benefits. 63 unique households in that very short time were able to utilize that tractor so that they can feed their own families, to include individuals that are not elders, right? Like if, for example, in that part of the world, there are a lot of grandparents raising grandchildren, and that's a topic I can discuss for hours, which is related to things like the opioids epidemic. And I don't have time to touch on that. But so this has a real far reach. And it was just a beautiful thing to see this pilot like really succeed in a massive way. We have enrollment centers that we fund for 1.5 to 2 years that help 500 people in that time. They served food and introduced people to benefits in like this much of that time. Like that's something you give a massive applause to, and you provide so much support and passion for. And, you know, there are what, 7 other pueblos, I believe, Lyle, right in that same community that are watching, that are very interested in this. Yeah. And yes, so Lyle, I want him to share kind of the impact of this, but also the vision of like how Lyle sees this happening in other places. So I'm going to stop here.
Yeah. Thanks, Randy. And yeah, Lyle, would love to hear from your perspective. And if you could talk a little bit too about how this collaboration from your perspective really built power within your community.
So, all right, thank you everybody again for having me. But first off, I'd like to say thank you, Megan, and your crew for allowing my village to be able to utilize this equipment and get this funding. You know, I'm sorry I get choked up when it comes to this, because it takes a special type of people for people to do this for other people, even though it's a job. You know, this is what life is really about, is all of us coming together, no matter what color we are, no matter where we come from, no matter our ethnic background, no matter if we're red, purple, yellow, orange, you know, we're all living, we all bleed the same color of blood. And, you know, going back to our teachings, they would always tell us that our plants are our kids, and the way we raise our plants is the way that our kids are going to come out. And for us to be able to take care of them, you know, we have to pull the weeds, we have to take every single thing away that is there, that is trying to hurt your garden, hurt your plants, hurt whatever that is there, not considering the elements that are also out there, the dryness, the rain when it overrains, the hail, freezing temperatures at times when this earth is going crazy, you know. So I'd like to tell you guys, thank you guys very much for considering me and also my pueblo as one of the pilots for this. You know, thank you guys very much. And but you know, also the way we did it is we had 2 young adults there that were helping, doing the planting, doing all of that, and they were my uncle, his name is Gilbert, he was the one on the tractor. So he started a class for these children, and for them to be able to learn all of these processes, from it coming out of from it being a seed, from it being a water, to it coming out, to its adolescence, to its adulthood, and then for its reproductive stage, for us to be able to eat it and then provide it to the seniors. You know, it goes beyond. We had floods, we had hail, we had every type of thing that you could imagine to stop this pilot and all this food from growing in like a matter of 2 weeks. A lot of our elders lost all of their crops because of the flood and because of the hail. You know, so in return, we were able to give them food back that we grew here at this farm, or that the people at the agriculture grew at the farm. You know, there's so many things in this world that we take for granted, and I think gardening and planting and water is one of the things that we take for granted, because everybody's so used to going to the supermarkets and picking everything up and not realizing where it's coming from, who these people are on the ground that are planting them, picking them, and doing all of that. You know, those are the people that we really need to give thanks to as well, you know. And you know, because there's not very many of us that would go out there to go do that. And back in the days when I was a young kid, I would always wonder why my grandmother would always wake me up at 5 o'clock. You need to get up. You need to go run. You need to go run. And I was like, oh, Grandma, let me sleep. She's like, no, you go run. And so I never knew the reason why. And finally, when I got older, she said, you know, son, you know the reason why I got you up so early to run is. I was like, no, I always thought it was just to be mean. You know, and it was like, no, she told me you're going to encounter hard times during your life. And if you have a strong heart, and running is what makes your heart strong, you will be able to overcome all of these hardships in life. You know, so I'm grateful for my grandparents, and I'm grateful to have them. My grandfather was the one in there. He just turned 99 years old yesterday. You know, he's a World War II veteran. He was in reconnaissance. He did all of that. But I owe a lot of gratitude to my grandparents. When I was young, we had chickens, we had eggs, we had turkeys, we had ducks. My uncles had cows and all of that, you know. So that tractor that they provided not only was helping for agriculture and for crops, but it was also helping them with their hay, the alfalfa and stuff for the cows, for them to further have meat during the winter times, and for everybody, you know. You know, this whole project for me, it was, I am so grateful that Randy asked me to take the lead on this. When I first met him, the first thing I told him, because I was the director at the Santa Clara Senior Center for 5 years as well, and I told him that not only is this a tribal senior center, but I do not pick and choose who gets to eat here, because food is for everybody. You know, and those are teachings from my elders that, you know, we have to be able to feed everybody, no matter if it's even a little bit, at least they got some of it. And you think about yourself last, because you're the one providing it. You feed everybody first, and you think about yourself last. And that's the way you get the gratitude. That's the way you get your blessings. That's the way everything comes back to you in return. You don't ask for it, any of that stuff, you know. So food everywhere is scarce, you know, and it's a shame that there's people that have to go days or even months without eating, you know, and that, right, you know, it's totally unfair, you know. And even what is the price that anybody has to pay to live a healthy, good life? You know, that should come free to everybody. Yeah. No matter what we're doing or what your past was like. And, you know, everybody has a heart, everybody breathes air, you know. And yeah, so yes.
Yeah, no, I just want to thank you. Someone said in the chat, Brendan, thank you for your vulnerability in this conversation. And I know that you you know, said thanks to us, but really, as you said, it's thanks to your community, the folks harvesting the food, the folks growing the food, this broader community that made the decision to fund your efforts. So a huge thanks. And if you don't mind, I'm going to turn it to Davida for a minute, and then I want to come back to you, Lyle, and hear a little bit about how you think this has built power in your community as you think about the future and what's next.
Okay. Sounds good.
Great, thank you. So Davida, would love to hear, you know, on the surface, it might seem like a completely different context that you're coming from, right? Detroit, a big city, but I think there's some connections between the work that you've been doing and what Randy and Lyle just spoke about. So I'd love to hear from your perspective, how did your community care for one another during this pandemic?
I'm speechless. I don't even know what to say. Oh my God, I'm so moved, Megan, by the work that Randy and Lyle have done together. And I am going to try very hard. I'm going to try very hard to maintain my focus. But more importantly, just like off the top of my head, I want to like try to connect the dots in terms of the similarities between our communities. And when I say our communities, I mean communities of people of color. And so Megan, I'm gonna come from a different context, yes, but no. And I think the way that I want to connect it to is I want to undergird what we just saw and what I'm seeing in Detroit by saying this. We are in a war right now. And we are in a war right now, this decades-long battle to fight for imagination. The imagination of what it could look like when we create food systems that preserves health and culture and well-being and dignity and aid for the people in our community. And Megan and Randy and Lyle, why I say we are at war right now when it comes to imagination, because for so long, and even today, we live within the imagination of a food system that we did not create ourselves. And as a Black woman, what I mean by that is I am very aware of during the Reagan era, he created this imaginary Black woman that was called the welfare queen, a woman who was a welfare recipient, who had children outside of wedlock, who was gaming the system. And as a result of that imagination that was created during that era, that directly impacted SNAP benefits. SNAP benefits were cut as a result of that image, as a result of that imaginary figure. And then boxes of shelf-stable food. You know, the food that Randy said his grandmother was like only for emergency purposes. She didn't even touch canned food. She didn't touch boxed food, but that's what Black folks got shipped to our house, into our houses, or stood in line to receive as a result of that image. And what Randy and Lyle has created, Megan, through the support of our community, is they have actually created us a different narrative. A different way for us to imagine what food systems can look like when we have control and power in our own community. That's what has just been created. And so I'm thinking about how that has affected my community in this exact same thing that we're going through, this imagination. Because a friend, mentor of mine says, if you can't imagine your freedom, you can't achieve it. Randy and Lyle, through this pilot, has put together a narrative that imagines what freedom and power and food sovereignty looks like. And so what am I seeing in Detroit? What is this moment that I'm seeing? You know, there's this connection, Megan, and I'm gonna wrap this up because I know you want to get to Q&A so we can have 15 minutes for it. But I've got to say that what we need right now is this vision for food sovereignty, right? Which Randy and Lyle has created, that shared language, connection to emotion, because I know I'm emotional, right? And we can't afford to allow corporations and to control our food system. And so we need this vision. And I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it on the ground here in Detroit through the Black Community Food Security Network. I'm seeing it as folks are taking their elders to the grocery store. I'm seeing it as people are providing resources for meals. And I'm seeing it really all across the country. I'm seeing it in Baltimore, the National Black Food and Justice Alliance, the Black Church Food Sovereignty. I see it in Soil Generation in Philadelphia, Dreaming Out Loud in DC, all of the ways in which Black folks in their community kind of addressed, and let me be very clear, they addressed food insecurity. And I want to be very clear because I know we know what that means, but I want to make sure that our audience understands that there's a difference between hunger and food insecurity. Hunger is addressing the immediate need, emergency food. What do we need right now so that you can be fed? What we're talking about is how do you address food insecurity, which is a direct correlation with you not having enough wages, enough income, enough resources to provide for the food for your family. And what I love about this example, through the correlation between Randy and Lyle, what I'm seeing on the ground in Detroit is that through growing food, cultivating food, feeding our elders, what we are doing is we are redistributing, reallocating resources, and giving the community what they need with care. And I think that's the connective tissue. And I'll just stop right there at 4 o'clock.
Pretty amazing, Davida, that you can be that powerful and share that much in a few minutes. And I know I definitely want to create some space for questions, but I do want to, just before we go there, do a rapid fire with the three of you. And I would love to hear let's try and do, couple sentences or less. What are your dreams or aspirations for how the power that has been built in your community can lead to food sovereignty moving forward? So Davida, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, so basically what I described to you, Megan, really quickly, and when I talked about the different organizations on the ground that I saw in the work, what I basically described for you is what folks know as mutual aid, right? What we need more and how it leads to, in my opinion, food sovereignty is we need more solidarity, not charity. And so what I love about this example, and what I love about food, and again, wrapping it up really quickly, Fannie Lou Hamer says, when you got 400 quarts of greens and gumbo soup canned for the winter, nobody can push you around and tell you what to do. And so food brings power. Food brings power. But more importantly than that, you take the combination of food bringing power, and what mutual aid does is it brings organizing power, right? Mutual aid is a way for us to create and organize our community. So what I really see that is really needed in our community and what's happening is that people are working together to meet the survival needs and build shared understanding of why we do what we do and why we need it. And then the second thing is that we're mobilizing our people, expanding solidarity and building movements. And then the third thing, and I think that's most importantly, is that Megan and Lyle and Kyle, we're being participatory, we're solving problems, and we're doing that all through collective action. And that's going to give us to the point of the sovereignty that I think we need and we want, and we will achieve.
Great, Davida. So it's building solidarity, collective action. Love it. Thank you. Lyle, how about from you? What is your dream, aspiration, your hope for how the power that's been built in your community during this last year and a half can lead to food sovereignty moving forward?
That one day that all of our people here on the earth would not depend on supermarkets. We would be able, if we give somebody a handful of seeds, that they would be able to flourish and grow for the rest of their life, and like Davida said, if we have food, that's power. Sovereignty is built by what we have and how we can make it continuously happen at food sovereignty. It is what you make it, and no matter how rough times can be, you'll still always get a little bit, and that little bit goes a long way.
Thanks, Lyle. And Randy, what would you like to add?
I want to lean in and say this. Working inside the Beltway of Washington, D.C., we need to cut this red tape shit. Like, cut it. There's so much red tape and so many boundaries placed around providing access to the type of pilot stuff that Lyle and I just showcased. That shouldn't be that hard to do. It really shouldn't. Like I mentioned, there are 7 other pueblos next door that would be interested in things like a plow and equipment that is sustainable to pull food that is fertile right there in their own community. That should be happening all across the US. So I'll stop there.
Thanks, Randy. So we have about 10 minutes left in our conversation today, and we really wanted to create space for questions from folks in the audience. So please go ahead and jump in with your questions, your comments. And as you all hopefully ask us some questions or ask our panelists some questions, I have a question for you. what is one dream or aspiration you have for your own community related to food sovereignty? So if you want to share your thoughts with us on that same question, we would appreciate it. And it looks like, Randy, you've got some folks in the audience that agree with you. Amber says, yes, the red tape is happening at the state level too, and it's infuriating. We got to cut that. So please jump in with your questions and your thoughts on what dream or aspiration you have for your own community. Love to hear it. I'm going to start with one as we're waiting for others to chime in. So I'm curious to hear, whoever, not everyone needs to respond, but whoever would like to, what have been some of the joys and challenges of the collaborations that you've talked about? Biggest joys and biggest challenges.
Yeah, I'll jump in real quickly while we're waiting for folks to chime in, if you don't mind, Megan. I'll say one of the biggest joys for me thus far, when I talk about this, that we're in this battle for imagination. If y'all remember, I talked about that, right? You know, Grace Lee Boggs, who was an elder, who's gone on, she died when she was 100 years old. She would always ask us activists in Detroit, what time is it on the clock of the world? And right now, my answer would be, we are in this phase of imagination. And that's just joyful to me, because it gives us the ability to reimagine everything. And I say, for me also, a part of imagination is memory. And we led off our conversation by paying homage to our ancestors. And you saw the joy that it brought all of us when we remembered. And what I'm seeing at the intersection of this fight for food sovereignty, and even with the racial uprising due to the execution of Mr. Floyd, I see this intersection now between radicalism, imagination, food sovereignty. And what comes to mind to me and what's joyful to me is that so many people, even our young people in our community, are discovering the Black Panther Party for the very first time. And when they dig deep into the memory, into the history of our ancestors, they know that they are now connecting to something much larger than themselves. Because beyond the flyness of the Black Panther and the black jackets and the black turtlenecks and the black leather berets, they had a survival program that ran from the 1960s and the 70s, including the free breakfast program, right? And so I get excited that our young people are rediscovering our history, and they're able to pull for that, to reimagine a food system, because once they know that something is possible and they have something to strive for, it breaks all of those barriers that it can't be done. It can be done because it had been done before. So I think that's one of the things that brings me joy.
I feel that joy, Davida, coming through the Zoom. Love it.
Awesome.
Yeah, really quickly. That reminds me of like the corner store, which we called the bodega growing up. And I loved going in there because of the music, right? And because it was native to the Puerto Rican culture. And the bodega back then had vegetables and fruits and like foods that were familiar to us, like yuca, right? And garlic and those sorts of things. And because of the poison of gentrification, a lot of those corner stores, bodegas, are gone. And so you lose that. I think that we need to go back to that cultural corner store movement and it not be associated so much with bad things like crime, but there's actually good that can come out of it. So I don't know where that thought came from, but when you were speaking, Davida, that I remembered that.
It sounds similar to what Latoya, thank you for sharing your dream or aspiration in the chat here. And Latoya says, Her dream is to have more gardens in her community and become less dependent on grocery stores. Laura, I just want to share one other. Lori said, my dream for my community goes back to what Randy, your grandmother taught. Canned and boxed food should only be for emergencies. People experiencing food insecurity should have more access to fresh and locally sourced foods. Thanks, Lori.
So for me, what was very exciting for me was teaching the young kids how to plant. And then after harvesting, teaching them how to preserve the food, drying it, drying the peaches, drying the apricots, drying the apples, roasting your corn and drying that for chicos, letting the white corn dry on the stalk so then we could have pozole, just different things like that. And then to teach them also that how to take care of the land and Mother Earth, you know, because in our religion where we're from as Native Americans, a lot of us, you know, our people believe that the woman is the caregiver to everything. She owns the rights to everything, because without the ladies, we have no life. If there was one man left on this earth, life would not continue. If there was one lady left on this planet Earth, we have a 50-50 chance of life continuing. You guys give us our air to breathe, just like Mother Earth gives the plants the air that it breathes and that it needs, and nurture everything. So, you know, just to be able to let the young men know that, hey, this is how you take care of your plants, and this is how you take care of our women as well. You know, that was something for me.
Wow, that's beautiful, Lyle. And Megan, I just wanted to, and I want to hear from Randy and Lyle, and if we don't have any more questions, I think that it's also important for us to speak on the second part or the other half of your question in terms of challenges, because that's super important that we hear and speak the challenges so that we can prepare for those in the future, right? And I think it's really important that we acknowledge that we live in a capitalistic society. I mean, that is capitalism. And what that means is that capitalism controls the means of systems that we depend on every single day: food, health, communication, transportation. And here's the thing, we don't control it, meaning we, the people. And that's a challenge. It's a huge challenge. And it's hard to imagine that we could survive any other way. But for most of human history, we did. And I think mutual aid projects, like what we've seen through Randy and Lyle and what we've talked about, can help us relearn what's possible, right? And I'll just say this in closing, is that we need to be aware and we need to be mindful that the movements that we are building, the collaborations that we are making, the mobilization that's happening in our community, this mutual aid will be co-opted. And we got to prepare for that. Corporations and corporate media will co-opt our language. They'll try to fold it into their narratives, right? Public and elected officials in different agencies will come around and try to make it about volunteerism. They'll label it as heroic. They'll say everything that it ain't. And that is what we are doing, is building power and sovereignty. And in some cases, the police and spy agencies will surveil, and they may even criminalize our efforts. So we need to be aware of when we take 2 or 3 steps forward in our quest for freedom and liberation and sovereignty, there's going to be folks that will want to push us back 15 steps. So let's be diligent about that.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Tavita. And as we thank you for acknowledging the challenges, those are real. And also, you know, just want to emphasize what you left us with in terms of closing and the power of our communities and building those collaborations and those networks. And I just want to lift up, as we close out today, a few more dreams and aspirations that folks are sharing with us, which Devin says, my hope for eradicating food insecurity, the message revolves around maintaining a healthy body, mind, and soul, as well as taking care of our earth. Thank you, Devin. Brandon says, my dream is to learn from my community on their food experience and what their needs and aspirations are. Wonderful. And on that note, I know we are just about at time. And so I want to give a huge thank you to our panelists, Davida, Brandy, Lyle. Thank you for not only being in this space with us today, but also for the incredible work that you're doing in your communities to build that power and build those collaborations. And as we close out our conversation today, I just want to leave you with this piece of art by Molly Costello. And this quote, "From our kitchens to our communities, we are cultivators of transformation." So please take that with you today, and a huge thank
Can I
you
say
to.
something real fast, please?
Sure, go ahead, Lyle.
All right. So I would like to say it in my language. Kwa uma ita kwa tima. Wayoma kakame uma kati ama ilkayani. Navas katita ama yesivayani. Kwa. I said, thank you all for this here today, and wherever you guys are from, may you guys travel home and be safe and live a healthy life. Thank you guys.
Thank you,
Beautiful.
Lyle.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Lyle. Thank you, Randy.
Thank you, guys.
Megan. Thank you
everyone.
so very much.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, Upswell.